Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. Now I am up here surviving in the snow past Snowmageddon, and well, it's snowing right now as a matter of fact. But we're braving the elements to bring you the weekly Wringer here today as always. Lots to get to. We're going to talk about the question from last week, which was a doozy. Many of you really stepped up to the plate. I read several half novels about last week's question about the awesomeness of Chrono Trigger, and lots to talk about there, folks. If you were looking for a short Wringer this week, I think you're going to be very, very disappointed. I just have a funny feeling this thing's going to go on for a little while. So just bear that in mind as you continue on into the vortex that is the weekly Wringer this week. Okay. Got to do that. Got to wrap that question up. Give you a few reasons about why I think that game is so awesome, and do a little reflecting on it. But then I want to get started on a conversation for next week that has to do with some of the upcoming systems, because we're starting to see a lot of these announcements come out now that are about the brand new consoles that are going to be available starting at the end of this year. So we're going to have a question about that for next week, which I think should be pretty exciting as well. All right. As I always like to do, I like to be able to welcome the new members to our little community here. Now, we have a lot of new members to the community that you know, join and register, but it's very few of you step up to the plate and actually want to have a question and answer time, which is what keeps the Clan of the Grey Wolf going. As you know, your answers to my questions, and then your suggestions of other questions I should ask, really do keep the weekly Wringer going. So, I like to welcome people that brave the, the commentary border, if you will. They step over that line and make the comments that keep the show going. It takes a little bit of a different gear, I think, to probably do a little with that. So I want to actually welcome the people that have just recently joined the community. So firstly, we have Anatory Lizard. Welcome to you. I think that's really cool. It's a neat name. Welcome and thank you for your comments. Also, Marquis, thank you for you. Glad to have you on board. Glad to have both of you on board. Thank you for being a part of the Weekly Wringer, and look forward to your comments moving forward into perpetuity in the future, as long as there is such a thing as the Weekly Wringer. Okay, we got to get down to brass tacks here, because this is very important, right? I mean, I asked a question last week that I knew was going to be a doozy. I knew it. I knew it when I asked it. So, just to recap a little bit, one of the things that I came up with a while back was the idea if I could ask you every once in a while about why something in video games that is generally accepted to be something amazing is so amazing. The first such questions I asked you about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which brought a great response from you. The second question, the one for this week that I asked, was why is Chrono Trigger so awesome? A lot of varied and many responses, but I'm going to get into a few ideas as I do now we're kind of running through every single one of the arguments. The first is that, well, let me say this too. The first thing I was going to talk about is the idea that several of you made a comment that you don't think that Chrono Trigger is all that awesome. And to you I say you're absolutely crazy. So let that one sink in for a little while. That might not be a very popular opinion among the community, but you know, to the thought that Chrono Trigger is not awesome, I simply respond, what? Of course it's awesome. Don't be ridiculous. But several of you did levy a lot of interesting critiques of Chrono Trigger, which I completely and totally accept. Listen, why something is awesome doesn't mean why it's perfect, or that it is perfect, because it's not a perfect game. I don't think there is a perfect game out there. At least I haven't been able to find one. So, you know, if we're really getting down to brass tacks and we really want to, you know, critique something, you know, in terms of nitpicking, then there's something we can do for every one of those games in the world, really. But with Chrono Trigger as well. It's not a perfect game. I didn't say, why is Chrono Trigger the perfect game? I said, why is it awesome? And the real answer, I think, drives in a lot of different reasons, or a lot of different places, and I'm going to get into some of that, of why, because you guys brought it up, why I think it is revered the way that it is, because I don't think there's any question about it. Go to any gamer conference, go to any gaming website worth its salt, go to any video game journalism website and ask around about Chrono Trigger, and all you're going to get are a ton of people going, that is one of the best games I've ever played. That is absolutely, fundamentally undeniable, and it's why I asked the question. All right, that was number one. Number two, one of the reasons that I saw really emanating throughout the entirety of the argument was the idea of refinement. And this is one of the reasons that that Chrono Trigger is so well respected and revered, because it is a refined video game. They did a ton of work in terms of polish, in really trying to make a very tight experience for the gamer. There's not a lot of looseness. There aren't loose ends and broken trees around in terms of how the game plays out. It's very, very tight. It's very seamless, and it's very, very well polished. That's something I think almost the entirety of everyone out there commenting agreed upon. It is a polished game, top to bottom. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And that tends to be kind of one of the things that make it so awesome. But I think there are a lot of refined games out there that have really terrible concepts that aren't necessarily awesome. And so that might be one vector, but we will move on. The second thing that came up a lot, especially among you haters out there, is the idea that Chrono Trigger really isn't that great, because really the only reason we like it is because of our rose-colored glasses. It was a part of our childhoods. It was something that we grew up with, and therefore, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or He-Man or any number of different Power Rangers, whatever the case, whatever you want to look back and take a look on, it probably isn't all that wonderful if we just remove those rose-colored glasses and we take another look at it. And I just have to say, I totally understand what the critique there is. There are so many things that are like that. There are so many things that really don't age well with time, or age with your maturity, so they don't grow up with you, for example. And I think Chrono Trigger is fundamentally not one of those things. I think the game has aged tremendously well. I believe that's why it's so popular on things like the DS when it gets re-released. I think it is in many ways one of the fundamental JRPGs that one could possibly reach out to play as an example of the genre in and of itself. And I think part of the reason that the tight packaging of the game works so well is because the game itself is timeless in a sense. It's not and I say that not in an ironic sense. That, I mean, obviously the game focuses around time and time travel, but I mean this in terms of it being a timeless classic. It is a game that I think pretty much anyone that I've ever exposed to that could pick up a controller, if they sat down and started playing Chrono Trigger, they are immediately engrossed by a lot of things that you guys talked about. So that rose-colored glasses notion came up quite a bit. I just don't buy it. That is kind of showing you my cards a little bit in terms of where my argument's going to be about why Chrono Trigger is so awesome, but I don't mind, because I just don't. I do understand the rose-colored glasses argument. I just don't buy it. I don't think nostalgia is what makes this game great. And to prove it, I actually plugged the sucker in and started playing it again over these last week or two. And I have to say, it is just as enjoyable today. It is just as fun to jump into now as it has ever been. And I think anyone that likes to play video games will like to play Chrono Trigger. And even people that don't like to play Chrono Trigger. So those were a couple things I went through. There were more, but they were contained inside your comments. So without further ado, I'll jump into the comments part of our little show here. Carrara 2 got us kicked off this week talking about the storyline and the characters being at the heart of why Chrono Trigger is so awesome. Now, I'm not sure about the storyline as much. I think there are some complaints that are legitimate against the storyline of Chrono Trigger. I wouldn't say it's the strongest story of any JRPG I've ever played. Now, is it an engrossing storyline? Yes, I think it is. But at the same time, it kind of only plays to the stereotypes, the archetypes of the genre, right? You have this really bad thing that's going to destroy the world, and it's evil and big and bad, and you have this kind of, uncaring and, the kind of, I guess, unwilling or not necessarily shy, but slow to draw hero that emerges over time to kind of step up against this, the chosen one, as it were. And you have, I think, a kind of bland storyline that just kind of brings you along in a very linear way. But where I think that point by Commodore 2 does make some sense is the characters, because I think the characters are very deep in this game. I think what's more is that they embody a particular style that I think fits the game very well. In other words, nothing really feels out of place. Have you ever played a Final Fantasy game where you just felt like there was a character or characters that just didn't fit with the overall kind of vision of the game? I can think of a lot of those. Have you ever played a JRPG or an RPG, for a matter of fact, even in Western RPGs, for example, even in something like Skyrim, where you felt like something didn't quite fit? I don't think there's anything like that in Chrono Trigger. Everything just kind of fits in its own place. Do you need every single character to finish the game? No. Do you have to use every single character to finish the game? No, absolutely not. Could you, basically completely cut people out of the game and still complete it and have fun and have a wonderful, wrapped up, tight, enjoyable package? Absolutely. But I think every character has a place, and I think if you spend time in it, if you're willing to spend some time kind of fleshing that out, I think you will never, ever be disappointed in that regard. I think that they each embody a particular element of the game that is fun, exciting, and really complements the entirety of the package. That is very important. Not a lot of games do that, folks. So I want you to appreciate the fact, and I think Commodore 2 is pointing toward it, that the characters of the game, the characterizations contained in the game, I think surpass the storyline as being something very engaging. You want to engage with these characters. They're fun, they have personality, and at the end of the day, that is what I think makes good characterization. Nobody is monolithic. They just have, well, maybe except for Frog, but you just want to engage with these particular characters, and I think it's fun, and I think that's why people like it. Sonic Rose talked about the idea of the deep combination, the kind of deep technique gameplay that is in Chrono Trigger, specifically with the techniques and the sword techniques, those kinds of things. And I think that's a very good point. Part of the reason why I think the characterization works so well is because it becomes kind of imbued with the battle system. It feels complementary. The battle system feels complementary to the game. It doesn't feel, as many of you pointed out, as a separate kind of universe within which you just kind of have to separate yourself from what's happening in the overworld or whatever the case might be. And I think the deep combination possibilities that go into the battle system are a very key part of that. If you think about the idea of being able to make different combinations with different characters, that's a really cool concept. Not something that's necessarily been or hasn't been done before. It of course has been done before and has been done many, many times since. What I think you will find, though, is very, very rarely is the system so deep, but still so simple to use, so easy to understand, and so varied in terms of combination. A lot of games really don't have a tremendous amount of payoff to do the kind of combinations and to learn the things you can learn by trying to do techniques with combinations of characters at different times. Chrono Trigger was a very rewarding system of using those techniques, becoming competent in them, and then utilizing them at the right time and the appropriate time in battle. I think there were limitations in that regard. I didn't say it was perfect, but I think it definitely does a better job than 9 out of 10 games you will find out there that have this kind of a system built into its combat. I just think it does a tremendous job with that. And at the end of the day, I think it is a part of what sets it apart from even other JRPGs, which, let's face it, there are a lot